BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of Astro Psych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the Teespring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. How's everybody doing? I hope everyone had a good weekend. And today I will be discussing the book Hunted by Mark Hewitt, as well as several other Zodiac Killer related subjects. But just one announcement to begin with. Tom Voigt released a video on his YouTube channel, Zodiac Killer Official, saying that there will be a new streaming program / TV show. I hope I'm using the right terminology. Do we still call them TV shows if they're streaming programs? Because then you can watch it on anything that's not TV as well. There's going to be a new show about the Zodiac Killer. Why don't we just say that? And this will be out on the Peacock streaming service. I have Peacock. It's actually one of the more affordable streaming services. It's only about $5.99 a month, I think, and I use it all the time. So that's something for us to look forward to, and we'll follow the developments of that in the near future. I've also been discussing and corresponding a little bit with Mark Hewitt, who is the author of the books Hunted, Profiled, and Exposed. 3 books about the Zodiac Killer, and I would actually like to discuss a very small section of the book Hunted here, and I will perhaps do a follow-up next week on this one, because I'm only going to look at some of the comments that Mark Hewitt has made about one of the first possible Zodiac crimes. The Zodiac Killer was a serial killer who operated in California in 1968 and 69. However, some people do not believe that the first Zodiac crime took place in 1968 with the Lake Herman Road murders. Some people think that it was in 1966 with the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, who was attacked outside of the RCC library, that's the Riverside City College, and she was stabbed with a knife and she was cut numerous times, and that her body was actually found on Halloween morning of 1966, and it was a very rough and brutal attack. One of the reasons why people think that Sherry Jo was murdered by the Zodiac Killer is because in a correspondence the Zodiac said that you've stumbled upon my Riverside activity, but you're only getting the easy ones. There were a hell of a lot more down there, and some people think that that was indicating that there were pre-Zodiac murders. In total, the Zodiac officially murdered 5 people during the crime spree that took place from 1968 to 69, beginning on December 20th and ending on October 11th of 1969. The Zodiac would also attack Darlene Ferrin and Mike Michaud on the 4th of July of that year, and then the Zodiac would stab Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard on September 27th of 1969, and the final crime was the murder of Paul Stein, a taxi driver, on October 11th of 1969 as well. So all of the confirmed Zodiac crimes took place in less than a 1-year cycle, and there are 2 real conflicting theories about this. The first is that some people think that this was just a crime spree that was orchestrated by someone, and it was specifically designed, it was calculated, it was done for a specific reason, and that's why there are so few incidents. We're a very short time frame. I mean, it's very normal for some serial killers to murder only 5 people, but normally the time frame is much larger than just a 10-month cycle. But then there's a conflicting theory that people would use to challenge that by saying, well, of course, the serial killer murdering 5 people in 1 year, that people just don't stop doing that unless they have a very specific reason. They think there were pre-Zodiac crimes and post-Zodiac crimes. Some examples of this would be the murder of Ray Davis in 1962, the Domingos Edwards murders in 1963, the Swindle murders in 1964, and the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966, which I will be talking about right now. As I said, Sherry Jo Bates was stabbed to death on October 30th of 1966 outside of the RCC library. And I would like to go to a part of Mark Hewitt's book called The Confession Letters, because this is another reason why people think that that crime was an early, less experienced Zodiac killer, because 3 sets of writing were mailed after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, going from November of 66 all the way to the spring of 1967. The investigation reignited 1 month after the killing with the arrival of 2 letters. On November 29th, an unstamped envelope addressed to the Homicide Division in Riverside was removed from the collection box in the main post office at 5 p.m. The block lettering, done in heavy felt pen, was likely a disguise of the true handwriting of the author. Inside, the RPD found their copy of the confession letter. The very next day, the Riverside newspaper, called the Daily Enterprise, today it is publishing as the Press Enterprise, received an unstamped envelope with a separate copy of the confession letter. And I've read this off on the channel before, but I'm going to read it again just to put some things into context, because I'm glad Mark Hewitt was talking about this, because I really wanted to do a bigger analysis on the confession letter, for lack of a better term. The confession by blank, and there's just a dash there. She was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead. She is not the first, and she will not be the last. I lay awake thinking about my next victim. Maybe she will be the beautiful blonde that babysits near the little store and walks down the dark alley each evening about 7. Or maybe she will be the shapely blue-eyed brunette that said no when I asked her for a date in high school. But maybe it will not be either. But I shall cut off her female parts and deposit them for the whole city to see. So don't make it easy for me. Keep your sisters, daughters, and wives off the streets and alleys. Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. She did not put up a struggle, but I did. It was a ball. I first pulled the middle wire from the distributor, then I waited for her in the library and followed her out after about 2 minutes. The battery must have been about dead by then. I offered to help. She was very willing to talk with me. I told her that my car was down the street and that I would like to give her a lift home. When we were away from the library walking, I said it was about time. She asked me, about time for what? I said it was about time for her to die. I grabbed her around the neck with my hand over her mouth and my other hand with a small knife to her throat. She went very willingly. Her breast felt very warm and firm under my hands, but only one thing was on my mind, making her pay for the brush-offs that she had given me during the years prior. She died hard. She squirmed and shook as I choked her, and her lips twitched. She let out a scream once I kicked her in the head to shut her up. I plunged the knife into her, and it broke. I then finished the job by cutting her throat. I am not sick, I am insane, but that will not stop the game. This letter should be published for all to read. It just might save that girl in the alley, but that's up to you. It will be on your conscience, not mine. Yes, I did make that call to you also. It was just a warning. Beware, I'm stalking your girls now. And it says, CC Chief of Police, Enterprise. Now, Mark Hewitt has a lot of analysis in this book on his own about the Riverside confession, and I would like to look at some of the reasons why some people think that this was written by the Zodiac killer, and then I'll talk about the reasons why people think that this was not the Zodiac. And bear in mind that this was 1966, so no one is impersonating the Zodiac because the Zodiac hadn't revealed himself to the world yet. So the points that Mark Hewitt has shared in this section of Hunted about why would this be written by the Zodiac killer. Number 1, the confession by blank, and there's a dash mark there. The Zodiac killer would do this later on when he mailed the Z13 cipher in 1970 that says, "My name is Dash. And some people like Kelly Marshall have built their entire theory based on this, and thinking that that's going to be the clue to everything, and that she has a whole bunch of tricks she does with the ciphers. But I don't agree with her observations. But that is a similarity. They both said that their name was Dash, or they used a blank space for their name. And then this is an interesting one that Mark Hewitt pointed out, that the person who wrote the Riverside Confession says her breast felt warm, and that is a reference to sexual activity in an early communication. The Zodiac Killer murdered Darlene Ferrin and shot Mike Michaud on July 4th of 1969, and on July 31st of 1969, the first cipher was mailed in 3 parts to the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, and the Vallejo Times-Herald. When you put the parts together in a specific order, it would reveal the solution. I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's even more fun than hunting wild game in the forest, because man is the most dangerous animal of all. And there's a part in there that says killing is the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. So the 408 cipher also has a reference to sexual activity, and bear in mind that none of the victims in either cases, the Zodiac crimes or the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, were sexually assaulted, yet the person writing the correspondences, if you will, is including a sexual connection, and I still think that this is the absolute biggest thorn in my side these days about trying to distance the Zodiac from the murder of Sherry Jo Bates. The use of the words twitch and squirm, and not only that, but twitch is misspelled, and then the Zodiac would later misspell the word twitch as well. Twitch is spelled Twiched in the confession, and let's just address this, that the Riverside Confession is absolutely filled with misspellings, and the Zodiac letters were absolutely filled with misspellings, and I think a lot of people are on the fence about this one as well. They might think that, well, we weren't using computers back then. Yeah, I didn't exist in 1966 either. They weren't using computers back then. They didn't have spell check. So if someone's typing something out on a typewriter, they perhaps didn't want to cross it out and start over. And I've seen that typewriter key that marks out a letter, but they didn't want to do that either. They're just going to keep on writing the typed confession, even if there are misspellings. But bear in mind as well that Jack the Ripper also had numerous misspellings in the correspondences from 1888 after the Whitechapel murders. But now, I've wanted to talk about the linguistic components of this Riverside Confession for quite some time. Now, Mark Hewitt even writes this out in Hunted on page 30, when he says the motive behind Bates's death, according to the letters, was revenge for the brush-offs she had apparently given the killer during the years prior. That is very important, because people can guess all they want, but I have not seen any substantial connection between the Zodiac Killer and any of the victims. Some people are saying that the Zodiac harassed Darlene Ferrin at a restaurant. Some people are saying that the Zodiac knew David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen and they were specific targets. I've even speculated that Cecilia Shepard knew the Zodiac because she was stabbed and the other victims were shot. And then some people think that this was all an elaborate plot just to kill Paul Stine because he had information about the killer, and a series of unrelated murders were committed to cover it up and just to confuse the authorities. Everybody has a theory. Everybody has a lot of educated guesswork on how the Zodiac Killer knew some of the victims, but I have never seen an ounce of convincing evidence that would suggest that. Let's look at the differences here in the Riverside Confession. What would suggest that the Zodiac did not write the confession? Firstly, Sherry Jo Bates is addressed by name. It says Miss Bates was stupid. She went to the slaughter like a lamb. And she's actually even mentioned a second time when it says that Miss Bates went willingly. Well, no matter what, though, looking for that exact line, so don't quote me on that. But no matter what, she is addressed by name in this one. and the Zodiac Killer did not do that, and that's not my own original observation. That came from Classic Chevy Cat, which she put in the comments section, and I invite all of you guys to put your ideas in the comments section as well. You can always like, subscribe, so you can follow along with all of these true crime discussions. But here is another thing that is very important. The person who wrote the Riverside Confession says very clearly that he, and I'm expecting it's a man, he's saying very clearly that he is targeting only women. And the Zodiac Killer targeted both men and women. And not only that, though, the Zodiac said very clearly that he wanted to hunt people for sport. As I said in the 408 cipher, I like killing people because it's so much fun. It's even more fun than hunting wild game in the forest. This letter says, beware, I'm stalking your girls now. And also, this is about going after women who have a very personal connection to this person. In short, if this confession is authentic, then that would suggest that this person knew Sherry Jo Bates, and he wanted to be romantically involved with her, but she perhaps either didn't notice him or rejected him in some way, so he retaliated in a very violent and destructive manner. But you don't get those types of details in the Zodiac letters. The Zodiac would talk about being lonely, the Zodiac would talk about the way the crimes were committed, but I don't recall anything specific, such as she had to pay for the brush-offs that she had given me during the years prior, and I'm also not convinced that feeling her breast while he is stabbing her is on par with something like getting your rocks off with a girl, which, as I understand, refers to ejaculation. And I would like to know what you guys think. What do you think that is a more convincing explanation? Did the Zodiac write the Riverside Confession, or was this just an unrelated person who wrote this? And it's an unsolved case, so anything is fair, but I still insist, even as someone who thinks that the Zodiac did not write this, the Zodiac had nothing to do with the Bates murder, but these use of words like squirmed and twitched, absolutely, absolutely. I have to give everybody credit for that who is standing by their observation. And Richard Grinnell of Zodiac Ciphers had a very interesting take on the Riverside Confession, and you can hear all about this on the Zodiac Killer channel's Interviews with the Experts series, where I've also interviewed Mark Hewitt. I'm the host of that program as well, and the Zodiac Killer channel also has released the podcast Serial Killer Z to A. But what Richard Grinnell said was, there is a very interesting commonality among all of the correspondences and pieces of writing that are found after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, and that is that they all contain the infinitive verb to die. That meaning that those two words are together, the infinitive verb. And some people were saying in the comments section discussing, is it just to die or is it the word die itself? The Zodiac, of course, used the word die, saying, and again in the 408 cipher, when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and those whom I have killed will be my slaves. I'm paraphrasing, but that definitely happened. But this is the infinitive verb to die, and that is not found in the Zodiac letters and correspondences, to the best of my knowledge at the time. But we have the Riverside Confession, which I've just read off here. Then there is the desktop poem that was found in December of '66, and then the 3 letters that were mailed in the spring of 1967 that say, Bates had to die, there will be more. And of course, the title of the desktop poem is Sick of Living, Unwilling to Die. So that is another very, very intriguing linguistic connection among those 3 correspondences. Also in this part of the book, Hunted, Mark Hewitt talks about the desktop poem, and I've read off a little bit about the Riverside Confession, so let's look at the desktop poem, and I'll read that for you guys again, even though I have shared it on this channel. In fact, I'll just go to page 36 and read some of Mark Hewitt's notes about the desktop poem. Earlier, sometime in December of 1966, a custodian at the RCC library, while stowing furniture in a separate storage room, discovered a desk whose soft plywood surface had been defaced with a poem. The desk was likely available to students in the library around the time of Bates's murder. Its doggerel, if tied to the killing, was only obliquely related. The prose went as followed. Sick of living, unwilling to die, cut clean, if red, clean, blood spurting, dripping, spilling, all over her new dress. Oh well, it was red anyway, life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die. This time someone'll find her. Just wait till next time. R.H. And I still stand by a lot of the claims that I have made about the desktop poem, that in the past, I said that it's not even talking about a murder, it's talking about self-mutilation, but the exact term that Mark Hewitt uses in the book Hunted is attempted suicide, and I do think that that is more appropriate. So maybe I have the same reasons, but yes, I would agree with Mark Hewitt. It is talking about attempted suicide. I mean, it says very clearly, life draining into an uncertain death. She won't die this time, someone will find her. And there's also a very big piece of analysis that is written in the book America's Jack the Ripper by Soren Korsgaard, when he talks about both the Riverside confession and the desktop poem. Now, as I understand from reading these sections here in Hunted, Mark Hewitt is perhaps taking the stance that the desktop poem was not written by the Zodiac, and perhaps it is not even Zodiac related at all, for the following reasons. Number one, it says that blood was spilling all over her red dress. Sherry Jo Bates was not murdered in a red dress. Number two, it says she won't die this time, but Sherry Jo Bates was indeed murdered. Someone will find her and just wait till next time? No, that didn't happen. So, in fact, because I have the book right here, I can just read some of that for you. Etched with a ballpoint pen, the words appear to describe the unsuccessful suicide attempt of a woman wearing a red dress. The only real relationship to the Bates murder were the poet's references to death, to cutting, and to blood. Bates did not wear a red dress on the night of her demise. The poem may have carried no connection to the case at all. The desktop message was signed with the letters R and H, interpreted by some to mean the initials of the killer of Bates. The letters could also have been a reference to blood typing, which distinguishes blood's RH factor. At the time of the murder, the president of the RCC, where the murder occurred and the poem was discovered, was R.H. Bradshaw, and some people even think that it is Robin Hood. In a recent episode of the Zodiac Killer News Report, I was also talking about something that was sent to me from Sefer Karimi, when he said that he thought that the R.H. was paying tribute to the poet R.H. Barlow, who also wrote lots of morbid poetry, and when I began to read some of it, I actually thought that that was a reasonable suggestion. But here is another challenge to some of these, and Mark Hewitt isn't endorsing any of these things, like that the R.H. is standing for Robin Hood, to be clear. But here is something that people have shared in the comments section on BlackBoxOnlineRadio, that the killer, I shouldn't say that, the author of the poem was using his real initials, or her real initials, but most likely his. They're using their real initials because they didn't expect anyone to figure out that it was them. They didn't even expect anyone was going to be paying attention to the desktop poem. So they were using their real initials. But I often notice that a lot of people, even at an early age, develop a pen name, a pseudonym, a nom de plume, if you will. So perhaps that somebody could have created this type of name that they wanted to attribute to their writing, like lots of writers use pen names. The whole point is that the writer was actually trying to sign his work with with a name that genuinely was used by him, and that this person was not the killer. I do have to stand by my statement that I don't think that the murderer of Sherry Jo Bates nor the Zodiac killer wrote this poem, because other than blood and death, there really isn't a lot of a connection. It was very good for the custodian to turn it over, but I think Mark Hewitt and I are mostly in agreement on that one. And one more time, I've been reading from the book Hunted by Mark Hewitt, and I'm not going to lie to you guys, I'm looking forward more so to the books Profiled and Exposed, because that actually will allow me to talk about some of the psychological observations that have been made by Mark Hewitt in the case, and that I really want to see how he's going to go down his journey of identifying the Unabomber as the Zodiac killer, because of course Mark Hewitt is also a supporter of the Zodiac Unabomber connection, and we'll hear about more people who have held those types of beliefs throughout this episode. But before I move on to the next segment, I would like to remind you guys that this show depends on your support, and a great way that you can support this program is to go over to BuyMeACoffee.com, and if you make a contribution to help support the show, all funds will be used for things like purchasing true crime books to talk to you guys about or buying equipment, and anybody who makes a contribution will get a shout out on Zodiac Monday, which will be done later on in the episode. But last week on the channel, I was reading from an article at ZodiacKillerFacts.com about that was written by Michael Butterfield, and he was talking all about people who have accused their father of being the Zodiac. And one of the largest critics of both Michael Butterfield and Mark Hewitt is Ray Grant, who is the author of Zodiac Killer Solved as well as the novel Zodiac Killer Dreams. And he had something to say about both of these writers, and Ray Grant's comments on Michael Butterfield are as follows. Let's do a quick chronology of Michael Butterfield. In 1998, Michael Butterfield threatened to punch Doug Oswell out on Google Groups for not giving him the contact information for Mike Risconi. In 1998 as well, Michael Butterfield announced that he had found Gareth Penn's radian theory and that it was a gold mine. In 1999, Michael Butterfield was filmed for the documentary Case Reopened, in which Butterfield demonstrated the Mount Diablo radian. Butterfield continued to defend the radian theory for 10 years, mostly in posts on Tom Voigt's original message board, even when he conceded that the Zodiac's angle was off by several degrees. Then abruptly in 2009, when he created a debunking website, Butterfield did a 180 and began claiming that he had debunked the radian theory because the angle was off by several degrees. Keep in mind that the measurement of the angle, which was done by Butterfield, Ed Neal, and Jake Wark, hadn't changed at all for 10 years. The measurement was close enough. Then magically, it was not close enough. It was a crackpot idea. Keep in mind that the writer of the Zodiac letters had fudged other details, for example, saying that the Lake Herman Road murders happened last Christmas, spelled Christ Mass, but they took place on December 20th, not December 25th, and the Blue Rock Springs Park murder happened on July 4th. Darlene Ferrin wasn't shot until several minutes after midnight on July 5th. Butterfield also failed to mention two other map-related demonstrations from Case Reopened, the first being that an angle comprising the two Vallejo crime scenes and the location of the July 5th payphone creates a 57.29-degree angle. A 57.29-degree angle is called a radian, and that the X's on the Zodiac symbol at the bottom of the November 9th, 1969 letter line up perfectly with the Presidio Heights, Lake Herman Road, Blue Rock Springs, and Lake Berryessa crime scenes. Maybe he forgot those, or maybe they were just inconvenient. And to provide a little bit of context, he is talking about the radian theory that was made famous by Gareth Penn. Gareth Penn released a book in 1987 called Time 17, in which he more or less stated that everybody has misunderstood the Zodiac Killer mystery, and that what they truly need to look for are mathematical signatures. Gareth Penn, along with assistance from his father Hugh Penn, found out that the radian, putting an angle of 57.29 degrees, approximately, on top of Mount Diablo shows that one arm of the radian goes to Blue Rock Springs Park, and one arm goes to Presidio Heights, where Paul Stein was murdered. However, it doesn't actually go to Blue Rock Springs Park. It goes to Blue Rock Springs, the golf course that is located there, the Blue Rock Springs Golf Course. Now, as far as this one here goes, I mean, I've interviewed Michael Butterfield on the Zodiac Killer channel. That is the only time I've ever spoken to him. I've also never exchanged a single message or email with him, but I can understand how somebody would have a change of heart about that, and I think he said something to the effect of that he used to be under the spell of Gareth Penn, thinking that this is the answer to everything, but he more or less had a change of heart on that particular subject. Now, as far as trying to punch Doug Oswell in the face, or even wanting to or threatening to, I have no comment on that other than that type of behavior is absolutely unacceptable. But Ray Grant continues with some of his comments about Michael Butterfield. In 1999, Michael Butterfield called Michael O'Hare a Zodiac killer suspect on the phone. Here is a description of part of the phone call from Butterfield's original Crackpot Files articles. Some years ago, I was talking on the phone with Zodiac killer suspect Michael O'Hare, and he mentioned that there was some other nut who had written a book about him using the same kind of mathematical distortions and fantasies employed by his original accuser, Gareth Penn. He mentioned that this person lived in Pennsylvania. Obviously, O'Hare was referring to Raymond Grant, who has since developed an elaborate theory in which both Gareth Penn and Michael O'Hare, the accuser and the accused, committed the crimes together. And I should point out that there are two other participants in Ray Grant's theory, Hugh Penn, Gareth Penn's father, and Berta Margulies, Michael O'Hare's mother. I had originally published my website in August of 2010. The Crackpot Files appeared on August 10th of 2010. In September, I sent a link to my website to the reality-based community forum, and O'Hare responded with an email to all of his colleagues that said in part, Ray Grant, whoever he is, and which included a link to the Crackpot Files. I assumed that one or two of those colleagues responded by saying that since Michael O'Hare brought Ray Grant up in a telephone conversation in 1999, it was hard for him to claim that he didn't know who Ray Grant was at that point. At this point, O'Hare realized that the paragraph from Butterfield's article could be a problem, and he asked Butterfield to remove the three sentences. When Michael Butterfield was interviewed by Ned DeHaan in 2021, Butterfield claimed that he removed the three sentences because they disrupted the flow of the article, which is ridiculous. Why would you remove a quote from a man you say is being unjustly accused, a quote aimed at the accuser in an article to illustrate the false accusation, just because the passage doesn't have the right flow? Well, I can tell you firsthand about how some of this operates. Michael O'Hare denies all knowledge of Ray Grant, and if you ask him about it, he'll say that he doesn't know who Ray Grant is, but he would almost certainly have to. Ray Grant has been very much involved with pursuing Michael O'Hare on the case, distribution of pamphlets, as well as his own book to people who have known O'Hare as well. And I've approached Michael O'Hare about this myself, and he's just simply said that I know nothing about Ray Grant. So, no, yes, of course, Michael O'Hare knows who Ray Grant is. Yes, he denies all knowledge of him, and I believe Ray Grant even wrote in the book discussion that I did on his work, Zodiac Killer Solved, that Michael O'Hare denies all knowledge of him because if he makes any public comments about him, then Ray Grant will sue him, and then they will go into disclosure to find out what actually happened. But Ray Grant can correct me on that if he wants. And the final comment that was written about Michael Butterfield was, between 1999 and 2007, Mike Butterfield used borrowed material from Microdeli and Howard Davis without their consent after promising not to use it. In 2007, Butterfield produced a book manuscript called Zodiac Death Machine, which might have seen publication, but Butterfield wanted to wait for David Fincher's Zodiac movie to come out first. Fincher's movie came out and Butterfield's book went into the mothballs. Also in 2007, Butterfield was signed as a consultant on David Fincher's film Zodiac. After the movie came out, Butterfield walked into the theater with recording equipment and made a copy of it, which is a felony. Since Butterfield was a consultant on the movie, it also constituted breach of contract. Butterfield then made DVD copies of the movie and sent them out using his own original artwork. And everything that you've been hearing has been the comments of Ray Grant. Now, as far as this here, I've talked to Microdeli quite a lot about this incident, and yes, Microdeli doesn't dispute any of these details here, that he obtained a set of police reports about the Zodiac killer, and that he sent them to Michael Butterfield because Michael Butterfield said he was writing a book, and he wanted to evaluate the police reports and compare them to the manuscript of the book, and then he said that he wasn't going to share them with anyone, and he did. And Mike Rodelli even talked about how he appeared on a TV show and he was holding the police reports and reading from them. So he shared them in every way under the sun and in the darkness. Now, I think that perhaps Mike Rodelli didn't have a copyright to the police reports because they weren't exactly material that was meant to be copyrighted. It's not that type of intellectual property theft, so to speak. Instead, it's more just a deceitful thing to do. But also, as far as talking about the book here, Tom Voigt wrote a very public story, if you will, about his interactions with Michael Butterfield. And he said something here to elaborate that Michael Butterfield was supposed to release a book about the Zodiac Killer around the time of the David Fincher film release, but he intentionally delayed the publication of his book because he wanted to include a review of the Zodiac Fincher film in his book. And you can read the full story on Tom Voigt's website, but I think that I'll just save that for him. And Michael Butterfield definitely disputes a lot of those details, but you can hear more about that in the interview that I did with him on the Zodiac Killer channel. And everybody, please stay tuned, and there will be one quick message, and the word from our sponsor will play, and then be right back with you. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody and welcome back. Now, I said that Ray Grant had made some recent comments about both Michael Butterfield and Mark Hewitt, and I would like to get to some of the comments he said about Mark because I used Mark's material as the source for the first part of the show. Mark Hewitt wrote into Black Box Online Radio about 2 or 3 weeks ago saying, "Great job, Ned. Thanks for another excellent podcast. Yes, the evidence suggests a lone individual." I was talking about how in the past that I thought there had to have been a group murder theory, what should be called a thrill kill club. When you look at all of the differences in the Zodiac crimes among the Lake Herman Road murders, the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the Lake Berryessa stabbing, and the murder of Paul Stein, most of these crimes all have something about them that is extremely different. And for a long time, I began to think that it was something that was like a thrill kill club, where you would have had one person who was the central planning mind, and maybe that person committed a crime, maybe he did not, and then a different person committed each of the crimes. And I slowly and surely walk away from that particular theory because all of the evidence could be explained by one single person. But I think that there are also other theories that people entertain involving multiple participants, that the shootings were committed by one person and the Lake Berryessa stabbing was a different person, or how about the letter writer and the person who wrote and designed the ciphers is one person, and the person who committed the murders was a different person. There are lots of theories involving multiple participants, and you can hear all about them here on Black Box Online Radio's Zodiac Mondays and some of the older episodes, and there is now a playlist for the Zodiac Killer news reports. So, Mark Hewitt also asked me if I had read his book Profiled, and the answer to that is no, not yet, but I will definitely be reading that very soon and discussing that on some of the future Zodiac news reports, and you'll see very clearly that Mark Hewitt's biggest critic is, of course, Ray Grant, who says, "Hey Mark, why not send Ned a complimentary copy of the book where you steal Doug Oswell's Suspect without mentioning your source? I think it's called plagiarism." Mark Hewitt used to show up on Michael Butterfield's forum in 2009 every 3 months like clockwork. Announced the latest journal entry in his quarterly journal Radians and Inches. Hewitt never posted about the case, just about how his journal was available. Hewitt's Hunted is a copy and paste job from other sources, such as the reports that are free and available on Tom's board. Mark Hewitt has never spoken with an original investigator or journalist assigned to the case. Mark Hewitt is second only to Gary Stewart as the purest mercenary writing about the Zodiac case. Wow, that is a big one. I mean, Gary Stewart, whom I talk about very frequently on the channel, is the author of The Most Dangerous Animal of All, and he was partnered with Susan Mustafa and Michael Wachsel. Michael Wachsel went on to release a companion book to that called The End of the Zodiac Mystery, and that is one of the most blatant grifts out there. And, I mean, it was purely done for profit, material that wasn't even Zodiac related, and just paraphrasing the police reports by their own admissions into just a little section that is included at the end of The Most Dangerous Animal of All. And you can hear all about that in my 8-part book discussion here on Black Box Online Radio. And someone recently informed me that the audio version of the book was online for free. Sure, access a free copy of it, but I beg you, do not pay money for Gary Stewart's book, The Most Dangerous Animal of All. Now, I'm still reading the book Hunted, and I'm definitely going to read Profiled and Exposed, and as I said, I'm looking forward to discussing the psychological aspects in Profiled and the Zodiac Unabomber connection in Exposed, and that will allow me to make a verdict on the subject. Who is telling the truth? Is Mark Hewitt right, or is Ray Grant right? Who is on the side of the truth, and who is on the side of something a little bit more sinister? So please stay tuned to Black Box Online Radio, and again, if you would like to subscribe to this channel, you can follow along with all of these true crime discussions. Every Monday is Zodiac Monday, and on Wednesday this year, I'm going to be starting a new segment about the Texarkana Moonlight Murders from 1946. The first episode is scheduled to come out next Wednesday, that's this coming Wednesday, and it will turn into a regular series because the Moonlight Murders is a very similar story to the Zodiac Killer. You had a hooded serial killer targeting couples in lovers' lanes and parked cars, and absolutely shocking, and just about how similar these two cases are. The Phantom Killer, who is the perpetrator in the Moonlight Murders saga, was never identified nor apprehended, and I have talked a lot about the Phantom Killer in the past. I have numerous episodes, even those old-fashioned black box recordings, but I will be approaching the case in somewhat of a more detailed attempt. And there are a new series of episodes out for the Anything Goes Friday segment, where any subject is fair game. This one has, these past few weeks have mostly been devoted to the case of Stephen Avery and Making a Murderer, where Stephen Avery and his nephew Brendan Dassey have been convicted for the 2005 murder of Teresa Hallback. Did they actually do it? Did they actually have any involvement at all with her death? Well, I invite you to have a listen to the episodes that I've done recently, and I'm doing a book discussion on Wrecking Crew by John Farrock, talking all about his observations on the case of Stephen Avery and the murder of Teresa Hallback. Now, let's give some credit to Douglas Oswell. He's having a rough day here on Black Box Online Radio. Firstly, someone threatened to punch him in the face, and now someone is saying that someone stole Douglas Oswell's suspect. Who is this guy? He uses the pen name Douglas Evander Oswell, which I suspect is not only his pen name, but also his legal name. And he wrote a book called The Unabomber and the Zodiac. And I would like to go over to Amazon.com and just read to you the description of this book that has been pulled into question. The Zodiac Killer murdered 5 people between December of 1968 and October of 1969. The murders were followed by letters to the news media demanding publication of his threats and other written material on pain of further killings. As the Unabomber, Theodore Kaczynski murdered 3 people and injured many more over a period beginning in May of 1978 and continuing through April of 1995. His murders were followed by letters to the news media demanding the publication of the letters themselves and the so-called manifesto on pain of further killings. These were not serial killers as the term is commonly understood, but deeply disaffected individuals, each with an axe to grind against the world. They moved to the same locations at the same time. They teased the authorities with cryptic clues as to their whereabouts and motives. Each killer identified himself with a graffiti consisting of lines within a circle. Both made references to opera. Their methods were different, but their madness was the same. This book highlights the amazing similarities between Kaczynski and the Zodiac, the 2 most enigmatic and cerebral killers in U.S. history. Now, I've corresponded with Mark Hewitt a fair bit over the last 2 years, and I openly asked him once, alright, there's this book out by Douglas Oswell called The Unabomber and the Zodiac. What really is the difference between your material and his material? And what Mark Hewitt said was that Doug Oswell was trying to just make lists and compile the information talking about the similarities and differences among these two serial killers, much as this Amazon description has just said at the end, talking about how they are similar and how they are different. The exact line at the end of the description was, this book highlights the amazing similarities between Kaczynski and the Zodiac, the two most enigmatic and cerebral killers in U.S. history. Okay, but then what Mark Hewitt said was that he went an additional step further and accused Ted Kaczynski directly of being not only the Unabomber but also the Zodiac killer. And as I said, I look forward to reading Mark's other two books to evaluate his observations, if you will. And while I was messing around on Amazon.com, I saw that Douglas Oswell had also written the book A Fantasia for Two Lutes, and it definitely got my attention, and I would just like to read the description of that book for you as well. Plague has struck a little town, and 17 are dead. 15 years go by. Aaron Westwood, sexton of the Old Grace Church, is tormented by guilt, its origin unknown. A gentle man, he spends his time in mindless work, through which he seeks asylum for his thoughts. But Christmas Eve has come, and thought has driven him into black despair. Upon the brink of suicide, an apparition leads him to the church, where Aaron meets the ghost of Margaret, a woman murdered 15 years before, a victim of the plague. Her love for Aaron draws her back to earth. She wafts him to the other world, where visions of his past and proceed on a trip to hell and confrontation with a stark reality. A Fantasia for Two Lutes is a Christmas story in the classic mold, with ghosts and visions and the promise of redemption for a life misled. Well, I definitely look forward to reading this book at some point in the future, although my reading list is getting rather big, as I said, between the books about making a murderer and the Zodiac killer, not to mention just some novels that I'm trying to sneak in. But yes, one more time, The Fantasia for Two Lutes by Douglas Evander Oswell. You can get this one on Amazon.com. And I should also point out, I've not had any interactions with Douglas Oswell. I don't really know the guy, so I can't really weigh in on any of these personal disputes that they're talking about, or somebody wanting to punch him in the face. But right now I would like to get to your shout-outs on BuyMeACoffee.com. The shout-out for this week goes to Floyd Black 53, who says, I look forward to Mondays, only for BBOR. Well, thank you so much, and I would like to read off some other comments that you guys have left, not from BuyMeACoffee.com, but just some other people who have said some things on a similar note. And I don't have this one in front of me, but I do appreciate the person who said, not only do we have Taco Tuesday, but we also have Zodiac Monday. Greatly appreciated to all of you. And I noticed that some of these comments came all at the same time. Some are on the recent Zodiac Killer news report, and one is from Sobek Lord, who says, thanks for always making the start of the week a little bit better. Cheers, Ned. And much appreciated, Sobek Lord. And Albert Forel writes, always a good start of the week to listen to your soothing voice and tickle that part of the brain that wants to solve this case, referring, of course, to the Zodiac Killer mystery. Albert as well, I thank you so much. But I will be very honest with you guys. Not everyone is a fan of what I have to say on this channel. I also wanted to give a little bit of counterbalance and read something from somebody named Call Me PJ, which was written out on the episode The Murder of James Allen. And this is an old podcast recording that I did back in 2020, but this comment came in just recently, and it says, WTF, you and your voice is stupid. And I couldn't believe that. I was like, did I read that correctly? You and your voice is stupid. You sound racist as F. How did 3,268 peeps listen to you? Yeah, alright. Well, okay there. Call me PJ. Firstly, you and you and your voice is stupid. I don't know why that I, I find that more humorous than I should. But yes, I was discussing the murder of James Allen from in the episode back in 2020, and James Allen was a police officer who was murdered by Esteban Carpio. And as far as being racist, Esteban Carpio did indeed commit the murder, and not only that, he didn't even deny it. The defense was an insanity defense, saying that he was not guilty by mental disease or defect. And as far as how did you get 3,268 peeps to listen to you, um, well, I don't know, dude. You were the one who was listening to my show. Why don't you tell me why you decided to listen in the first place? And yes, there are more than 1,000 episodes of Black Box Online Radio, and this one is under the full title Plastic Mask, The Murder of James Allen Re-Upload. I also did an older Black Box recording on the murder of James Allen, and if you would like, you guys can go through all of the older content and find anything that you are curious about. I even have people still leaving comments on the old episodes from 2017, the pure podcasts that are done where there's just a black box on the screen. I like to call them the old-fashioned black box recordings. But to all of those people out there who think that me and my voice is not stupid, there is something out there on AstroPsych 400 called the Podcast for Sleep. Some people are saying that they use this program, Black Box Online Radio, as a way to fall asleep at night, and I thought, why not create a podcast that is specifically designed to help people fall asleep? And this comes out on the weekends. One more time, available on AstroPsych 400. And the episodes are about 30 minutes long, but I use this one all the time. I mean, I'm a person who uses audio to fall asleep at night. I really started that back in 2018 when I just always want to be listening to something when I fall asleep, and I kid thee not, either AstroPsych or BBOR are the things that help me fall asleep, just because so many other podcasts really overdo it with the music or the effects, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, they're not making a podcast for sleep, but I thought on AstroPsych 400 I'll just do it in a very specific way that should allow people to fall asleep at night. And right now I would like to give a shout out to Bruce, who uses the YouTube handle BH. Bruce has contributed a lot to the show, and he provided the source material for an episode that I did on Zodiac Mondays about 7 or 8 months ago that was called the Voice Print article, when he was sharing something from Argosy magazine that was talking about, do they have the Zodiac killer's voice recorded? And Argosy actually had numerous publications out about the Zodiac Killer, numerous issues of their magazine. And firstly, Bruce shared some old magazine covers with me, but this one is actually from 1971, and it was called Long Forgotten Clues May Trap the Zodiac Killer. Just before Christmas, 1968, Northern California bloodthirsty phantom who calls himself Zodiac launched a murder orgy. What the? That still baffles the top manhunters of the world. 2 years previously, he may have tipped his hand to his true identity. This is the current belief of criminological experts working in concert with Argosy's watchdog for justice on this fantastic case. Two new strange confession clues to the Zodiac case have only recently come to light. They were written, and authorities are convinced, in the wake of the brutal 1966 murder of a co-ed in Riverside, California, long before the 1968 to 1970 homicidal rampage that brought the Zodiac into the ghastly focus in the San Francisco area. Now, it says 1970, but none of those crimes were ever confirmed, much like how the murder of Sherry Jo Bates in 1966 was also not confirmed. The Southern California murder, from which these long-forgotten clues have now spectacularly surfaced, was that of 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates, a co-ed at Riverside. On October 30th, Miss Bates was en route home from a study session at the college library, and she was abducted from her intentionally disabled car, savagely beaten and stabbed numerous times, and left for dead in a ditch near the campus. I don't believe Sherry Jo Bates was actually left in a ditch. I mean, everything else I've read says that she was found in an alleyway, but I digress from that. However, despite the savagery of her assault, she had not been sexually molested, a quirk of the Zodiac's later crimes. Now, I know that this article is trying to attract readers, right? It was written in the 1970s for a magazine, but would you really call that a quirk, not molesting the victims? I mean, what they're trying to say is that the Zodiac did not sexually assault the victims. Well, I mean, would you really call that a quirk? I mean, I don't mean to be overly judgmental, though. Although the material that has been studied exhaustively and scientifically by some of the world's top criminal minds strongly believe that some of our readers may find it still overlooked, and that there are hints to the Zodiac's identity which could lead the bloodhounds of justice back to a hot new trail. The male confession is now believed by police and scientific technicians to have been the very first boastful self-disclosure by the Zodiac, referring to the male confession after the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, which I was talking about at the beginning of the episode, that he senselessly slaughtered a young woman more than 4 years ago. Typed in capitals and unsigned, it was one of two mailed to a Riverside, California newspaper and to local police in the fall of 1966, not long after the brutally murdered body of Sherry Jo Bates was found. Bearing Riverside postmarks, each of the two was contained in a plain envelope, the address hand-printed with fiber-tipped pen similar to the kind later used by the Zodiac in the wake of his vaunted claims to the perpetration of 13 more equally unsolved murders near San Francisco starting in 1968. Well, I certainly don't believe the Zodiac Killer murdered 13 people, and yes, this article was getting very fluffy on the details, but I mean, they want to make a lot of noise and get people to buy publications back in the 1960s and 70s, so to speak. But it continues. More than a month after the two mysterious letters were received, another clue to the Bates murder came to light. It was in the form of a hand-printed poem, laboriously scrawled on the surface of a desk in the college library. It was discovered by a building custodian on the desk and frequently used. This so-called poem, a meaningless jumble of 10 lines in crude free verse, has been printed with fiber-tipped pen. It was signed R.H. in lowercase letters without punctuation. A photograph of the weird message on the desktop taken shortly after its discovery accompanies the article, and, well, I'll share it with you guys. It has been examined by the technicians at the State Crime Laboratory in Sacramento, who have determined that the handprinting is identical to that of the Zodiac, as found at the scenes in the late 1960s murder spree. No connection between the still unsolved slaying of Miss Bates and the Northern California butcheries, what a weird word to use, about which the weird hide-and-seek killer since has bragged, was established until recently, but new discoveries may provide vital clues to heating up the trail to the Phantom Zodiac. Maybe the Red Phantom, red with rage. Handwriting on the Zodiac confession envelopes of the 1966, as well as the phraseology of the bizarre statements, now have been linked to the will-to-wisp Zodiac. Here are some excerpts of the Riverside letters 4 years ago. And this is when it says, she was young and beautiful, but now she is battered and dead, which I've already read off in the episode. Oh, I mean, to say something praiseworthy about this article, if they want to talk about linguistic similarities, absolutely there are linguistic similarities which I've gone through, and I will give them credit for that. There are lots of reasons to think that the Zodiac Killer was a prolific serial killer who operated well before 1968. I'm just not convinced of it. And people really do have these very strong connected theories all about how their suspect was beginning to commit crimes in 1962 and then went all the way up until 1970 and beginning with the murder of Ray Davis, culminating perhaps with the disappearance of Donna Lass, or maybe even the Kathleen Johns attempted abduction off of Highway Route 132 in California. So there are lots of possibility about how that could be true. I'm still not convinced, and it's going to take a lot more than just similar handwriting for me to give some type of label of endorsement on somebody's zodiac theory like that, but I really do appreciate Bruce sharing this with me. And Bruce has also provided the substance material for a missing persons case involving his own father. He was the first person to ever reveal that stuff with me, or ask me to do an episode on his father's disappearance. His father's name is William Higgins, and there is an episode about him on this channel called The Disappearance of William Higgins, which I invite you to listen to. And Bruce has also really done a lot of work in going through the older documents and things like the magazine articles, and you see all these covers here back from the 1970s. And the real reason why I wanted to read that off was I think it's always valuable to hear what on-the-ground coverage was like back in the 1970s. Like that article was from 1971 in Argosy magazine. What were people actually saying about the Zodiac killer back in those days? And to move on to the next segment, I would like to give a shout out to Andrew WVA, who sent this into the email address. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. And Andrew says that, "Hi Ned, recently I read an interesting article from 2006 regarding the Zodiac's motivation for sending in the Z13 cipher. Now, I've talked a lot about the 408 cipher today, but the Zodiac killer actually has 4 confirmed ciphers. The first is the 408, then there is the Z340, which was recently solved within the last 2 years. Maybe it's been a little bit more than that now, I forget what year it is. But then there was also the Z13, which Andrew just mentioned, and the Z32. They get these names because of the number of symbols that they contain in them. The Z13 is also called the My Name Is cipher. So I read an interesting article from 2016 regarding the Zodiac's motivation for sending the Z13 cipher. Author Michael Cole of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy points out that Zodiac's cipher came exactly 6 months after a challenge that was issued by Professor D.C.B. Marsh in San Francisco. He published this in the San Francisco Examiner on October 22nd of 1969. Professor Marsh, president of the American Cryptogram Association, challenged Zodiac to reveal his name in a cipher. The proposed Z13 solution, featuring Richard Gaikowski's age and date of birth, has already been featured on your podcast. I think Richard Gaikowski was very comfortable with numbers. He had an interest in astrology and was an economics major in college. So if Gaikowski were the Zodiac, it's logical to assume that he responded to Dr. Marsh's challenge with his date of birth instead of a name. It is an interesting thing to note, however, that Zodiac also seems to have included this information in the 340 cipher. If you look in the center of the cipher, you can see DOBCNCF. It is also visible in the vicinity of DOB. CN and CF also translates to 31436, of course. The 340 cipher came not long after Dr. Marsh's challenge, and Zodiac researcher Richard Grinnell has reasonably asked if the 340 also contained a response to Dr. Marsh. If you believe Gaikowski is the Zodiac, then he actually did respond twice to Dr. Marsh's challenge, albeit with the Z13, more prominently featured Richard's age and date of birth. Several months ago, I also pointed out how you can find the number 33, Richard's age, September 1969, on Brian Hartnell's car door, when the Zodiac wrote September 27th, 69, 6:30. So there appears to be some precedence for this sort of thing. Best regards, and thanks for all the great podcasts, Andrew. And to provide a little bit of context, the Zodiac killer committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing on September 27th of 1969, and after stabbing Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, the Zodiac walked back to Brian Hartnell's Carmen Gia, and he wrote a message on the car door. He drew the Zodiac symbol, he wrote the word Vallejo, he wrote out the dates of Zodiac activity, such as 12/20/68, 7/4/69, but when he wrote the date of the Lake Berryessa stabbing, he wrote Sept 27/69. He did not write it out as the numerical version. He wrote SEPT, referring to September, and I've been guessing until the end of time, why on earth would somebody do that? Why on earth would somebody deviate from that particular pattern? Like, why would they go about it in that exact way? And the only thing that I can think of is that I don't know, but a lot of people have provided ideas, and Andrew has said very clearly here that he is of the belief that that was Richard Gaikowski's age. If you add up the digits in that line, that reveals 33, and Geik would have been 33 at the time, partnered with the solution that you've been seeing on the screen about the Z13 cipher, which shows how the you more or less have to put the single digits on one line and the double digits on the other line, and you can also total up the year in which Geik was born, and then you'll get the information about his date of birth. So that if that is indeed how somebody like Gaikowski planned the Z13 cipher, it's very intricate and it's definitely very impressive. But of course, this is an unsolved case, and those solutions are possibilities, but I do greatly appreciate Andrew WVA for sharing that with me. And he says, for a bit of backstory on the date of birth 340 discovery, it was actually given to the credit of researcher Eddie Barsh. He noticed it a year ago, and prior to me, referring to Andrew WVA, but I added the date of birth to his find. Z-searcher Sean Z is the one who came up with the Z13 solution. My only contribution was to suggest to look for the number 36. Well, Andrew, I do appreciate everything that you have shared with this show all the same. Final thing for the Zodiacular News Report is I would like to read something that was sent to me by a different Andrew Gray, and also giving credit to Richard Grinnell. It talks about an old newspaper clipping talking about the Blue Rock Springs shooting on July 4th of 1969, which saw the death of Darlene Ferrin and the murder of Mike Mageau. Now, as far as the time, earlier in the episode, Ray Grant stated that the shooting most likely occurred right after midnight. It's really hard to say. In some of the estimations I've done on this channel, I've thought that perhaps the most exact time would have been 11:55 p.m. on July 4th of 1969, or 12:01 or 11:51. It's going to be somewhere in that very, very small 10-minute window, which is really quite saddening, because Officer Richard Hoffman should have been in Blue Rock Springs Park 10 minutes before the shooting doing a patrol. But Andrew Gray shared an article with me about Mike Mageau recalling the events after the shooting. And there's a highlighted piece of text here that says, Mageau described how he half-leaped and was half-knocked onto the back floor of the car. His legs were thrashed out, partly from the shock of the wounds and partly from his efforts to evade and the slugs on his other limbs. When the killer stopped firing after the first fusillade, Mageau partly boosted himself up on the rear seat. He started firing again. Mageau said that he lashed out with his legs again, and the Zodiac talked about this very clearly, saying that the boy was shot in the knee. But there is a newspaper article from the beginning that is giving some more details that talks about how Mike Mageau was sitting in the passenger seat of the Blue Rock Springs car. The Darlene Ferrin would have been in the driver's seat, and what may have saved Mike Mageau's life is that he was leaping into the back seat, and he was definitely shot multiple times, not only in the knee, but also in the jaw, and I believe the bullet even went through his tongue. It sounds horribly painful. Serial killers are terrible people, deranged individuals. And I do talk about this a lot on the channel, and all of the observations about criminal behavior and psychology, and that one person who said that I sounded racist as F for doing it. Well, people do commit crimes, and sometimes people don't want to admit that. Sometimes people want to project a particular belief system onto the situation, but that is not an appropriate thing to do. It is inappropriate just to say you can't talk about certain cases because, well, you're a racist. I mean, like, I really have no idea what he was referring to as terms of being racist for discussing the murder of James Allen, and I don't think I said a single racist thing in that episode. Instead, it's just involving a perpetrator who was of a different race, but these are real stories, and these happened, and that perpetrator didn't even deny that he did it. He more or less admitted it. He was just trying to get off on an insanity defense. And if you'd like to go through some of the episodes here on Black Box Online Radio, I invite you to do so. And on AstroPsych 400, I'll also talk a lot more about not exactly psychology. I mean, part of it's in the name AstroPsych 400, right? But just how people are thinking, but not from a professional standpoint, from just my own observations on life, because there's the scientific world, there are the social sciences, but sometimes there are just comments that we make about life, observations about existence, and I will definitely keep on sharing all of those with you here on Black Box Online Radio. Thank you so much for listening to this episode here. Anybody can write the show at blackboxonlineradio@aol.com, just as Andrew did. You can also get me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box. And there is always BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. And I will see you over there for the bonus podcast. Until next time.